Hello and welcome to the Life and Legacy Show, sponsored by the Sechler Law Firm, where great families make great estate plans. My name is Tim Sechler. I am a certified elder law attorney and the owner of a law firm called the Sechler Law Firm, which is headquartered in Cranberry Township, but doing business all around the greater Pittsburgh region. And if you are new to the show, welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you learn a lot. You can find all the old episodes that you've been missing for the last 3 years on our podcast on iTunes or Spotify. And links to some videos. We usually record this as a video, which you can find on YouTube as well. So it is called the Life and Legacy Show. My name is Tim Sechler, and we talk about all things that I think my clients need to know about their estate plan. So we talk about things like wills and trusts and powers of attorney, and I have episodes on tax, and we've got episodes on asset protection. And really, I'm an educator at heart, and I just want people to know the things that they should be considering when they go to an attorney, whether it's us or somebody else, the questions you should be asking, and how do we make an effective estate plan. And so today we're going to do more of a technical episode, and it's talking about trusts, whether you've done a trust in the past and it's time to review that old thing, or whether it's time to do a new trust. Why do some people use trusts rather than wills? And I think the first thing to understand is that there is no one size fits all when it comes to estate planning. We have some philosophies in our law firm on asset protection and some different reasons why you ought to take a look at trusts. But not everything fits for everybody. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is not make any legal or financial decisions based on what you hear on today's episode, or for that matter, any other radio show. This is for your education and for your information. I'm not telling you specifically what to do because, frankly, I don't know enough about you yet. I'd love to meet you. If you would like to work with our law firm, you can find out all about it at sechlerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com. And if that's hard for you to remember because you're driving, go to estateplantim.com, and that'll get you there. And while you're at the website, cruise all the information we put out. I mean, there's hours and hours and hours of video accessible through our website. And there is also the opportunity for you to register for one of our upcoming 3 Secrets to Protect Your Legacy workshops, which is great information. So during the workshop, we do some of the information we're talking about today, like technical stuff and just philosophically what makes a good estate plan, and the things that you should be thinking about. So today I want to talk about trusts. I get a lot of questions about trust. People email us in and ask questions. People call the office and ask questions. They come to the workshop, they ask 1,000 questions. And in particular, I had a situation the other day at a workshop where I was explaining the difference between revocable trusts and irrevocable trusts. And I had 2 different guys have 2 very different reactions to what I was saying. And the first reaction was when I said that revocable trusts don't do anything to protect assets from like long-term care expenses. And he just was adamant I was wrong about it. Not that I've been doing this for like 13 years or anything, but he was adamant that he knew more about this than I did. And we had to sort of give him some information, some education, sort of set him straight. And finally, he was convinced that we actually knew what we were talking about. And then the second person really had some misunderstandings about irrevocable trusts and what you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. And this person happened to be an accountant. So he's kind of in the financial industry in a way, and had some very big misconceptions about what is allowed in a trust. And so what I thought I would do is do some general information and sort of set the record straight for some of the things that these fellows had questions about, which may in fact then be some of the things that you may have questions about, and hopefully you find it helpful. So let's talk about trust for a minute. There's lots of types of trusts. Okay, so let's start with there are big categories of trusts, and there's probably 3. There's a revocable trust, there's an irrevocable trust, and there's a thing called a third-party trust. Now, a third-party trust is a trust that someone else sets up for you, right? And in that category, that could be a lifetime trust, or it could be after you pass away, you set up a trust for someone else. So that's like a third-party trust. But if it's a first-party trust, me putting in my stuff, and I'm the first party, then that breaks down into 2 categories of revocable or irrevocable. Okay, and we use these trusts for a variety of reasons. With revocable trusts, a lot of these documents are pretty similar to each other. Okay. With irrevocable trusts, there's a lot of different varieties of irrevocable trusts. Some are used for special needs planning. Some are used to house life insurance. Some are used for federal estate tax planning. Some are used for asset protection planning. And so we'll talk a bit about that. But if you're new to the subject of trust, here's what I want you to think about. Imagine I'm standing in front of you and I got a little red wagon, like a radio flyer wagon, something like that, right? There's three people involved in a trust. The trust is created when you execute documents that are drawn up by a lawyer like myself. So you sign the document, you just gave birth to this new legal entity. Okay, it's its own legal thing, right? And when I explain this to people in person, I actually have a little red wagon in my hands to explain how the thing works. And so the person who creates it, that person's title is called the grantor. You grant ownership of your stuff to this trust. So I create a trust, and then maybe I put my house in the trust, or I retitle a bank account to the trust. The trust now, in a way, you can think about it like the trust now owns that asset. Okay. The person in control of the trust, the person that would have the handle to the wagon, it is in control, it tells it where to go and what to do. That person is called the trustee. And then the people who are allowed to use the stuff that are in the trust, the bank account, have access to the house. The people that have access, those people are called beneficiaries. Okay. So the grantor creates it, the trustee's in control, and the beneficiaries have access. Now, the terms of that access, the what they are allowed to access and how they're allowed to access it may be limited by the terms of the trust. But the trust, generally, we got a person in control. Generally, we got a person who has access. Now, in some trusts, I want to be all three people. I want to be the grantor, I create the trust. I want to be the trustee, and I want to be the beneficiary with sort of unfettered access to the stuff in the trust. Well, if I've got total control and I've got total access, we're talking about a document called a revocable trust. All right. The idea is this could be an individual document, it could be a joint document. And the reason that we use revocable trusts, or the way that it works, is I put my stuff into the trust, or my wife and I put our stuff into the trust. We're our trustee. We use the money in the trust however we want for the rest of our lives, right? So after we go through this process of setting this thing up and funding the trust and putting the stuff into it, life goes back to normal, right? We're using the money however the heck we want. The difference usually is we're putting a couple of different things into this thing, but the reason that most people use a revocable living trust is because when they pass away, if you don't have a trust, if instead you're using a will for distribution of your assets, wills have to go through this process called probate. Now, probate, lawyers talk about avoiding probate, and financial folks talk about avoiding probate for three different reasons, right? Well, one is it takes forever. Two is it can be expensive. It's common for lawyers to charge on a percentage of your net worth in order to help your trustee or your executor rather, after you pass away. Third, there's information that could have otherwise probably been kept private that is now public record, like how much money your kids inherit and all that. Those are three reasons that are generally used for revocable trust. Now, if you find a dozen attorneys will tell you whether to do it or not to do it. They'll have different opinions. And, and what I find is some attorneys that don't do a ton of this planning, they may not be comfortable with the subject matter or really understand it. But the probate avoidance is an issue that a lot of people talk about. Now, revocable trusts are also used for different reasons. They're common to be used if I want to do remarriage protection. Okay, so what is remarriage protection? Let's say that let's just make up a story here. I love my wife, Robin. If you ever meet Robin, she's wonderful. Like, we have a great relationship. It's great. However, if I pass away young, Robin and I have three little kids, right? And I trust Robin. I trust Robin, but I don't trust her next husband. And being in this industry, I've seen what influence can do. So, here's the thing. My wife would really like to have a swimming pool in our backyard. I don't want a swimming pool. It turns out that contract requires 2 signatures. And so we don't have a swimming pool in our backyard because I don't want to take care of it. Right? But if I pass away and I have a whole lot of life insurance because I own a law firm and I've got that employs people, and I've got 3 little kids and a wife I love, I got a lot of life insurance. So if I pass away and all this money just goes to my wife, what everybody else does, then, what's going on in the backyard after she gets the life insurance money? Uh, there's a pool in the backyard now, right? And so now my wife is sitting in the house. She's mourning the loss of her perfect husband. And she looks out the window and there's the pool. Now, here's the thing. The reason I don't want a pool is I don't want to take care of it. Right? Robin, I can assure you, also does not want to take care of it. But she's got this life insurance money. She puts a pool in the backyard. Now, who's taking care of this pool? The pool boy. Right? Now, let's say he's 27 years old and nothing but muscles and tattoos, and he looks very different than me. And she looks out the window, and there's the answers to all of her prayers, right? Is Biff the pool boy. And so I hope I got you chuckling this one. So there's Biff, and he's now involved with my wife. It's hard for me to even say it, but and so here's the question: who's in control, and who's got access? And what happens if Biff marries my wife? And what happens if Biff later divorces my wife? And how many kids does he have? And I didn't buy this life insurance for Biff to get a free ride. And so, one of the things I could do if I wanted to, I could have a revocable trust and have some of the life insurance payable to this trust. And if I pass away first, then the trust has some terms and conditions. Now, Robin's going to be just fine. I'd leave her enough money. She's going to be just fine. But some of that life insurance money is for the benefit of my children. And maybe I want to put some terms and conditions around that money that would not be subject to Biff the pool boy's influence, right? Maybe I want to put my brother in control of some of the money. I have a brother who happens to be in federal law enforcement, and I'm not concerned about him being influenced by a pool boy, right? So now I know that I got somebody with morals and values consistent with mine that is not subject to influence of this next relationship, that's going to make sure my kids are raised the way I would prefer that to happen, right? Not that it's, and so a lot of families will have this conversation around remarriage protection. Somebody's probably listening to this radio show right now thinking, man, I'm glad I didn't marry an attorney to listen to this guy. But when you get down to it, to me, it just seems like practical planning. And, if my wife is concerned about the same thing, she's not worried about the pool boy, but she might be worried about the Bambi, the barmaid or something, and so, it could be a thing that we use. So that's a reason why you might want to consider some trust work, is because you want to put some terms and conditions to plan for a certain set of circumstances. And if we're going to do that, I would prefer, if we want to do that type of planning, I don't want any court involvement at all. I don't want the thing established in the probate court. I don't want any of that headache. We're just going to handle this as a private family matter. So that could be a reason that you look at revocable living trust. And for similar reasons, families that are second marriages, maybe we, if I would marry somebody that has children, I've got kids, she's got kids. Maybe I want to take care of her during her life. But then when she passes, I want the money to go to my kids. That would be a good reason to consider trust work. And, there's other reasons to consider using a revocable living trust, but I happen to like the use of revocable living trust. It tends to keep the headache down for your kids. One of the things that people tell me all the time is that when they pass away, they don't want to be a burden. They don't want this to be a stressful situation. They want to keep the family peace. And it seems to me the trusts, when the way that they're managed, we don't get to avoid, with a revocable trust, we don't get to avoid all the headaches of probate, but we do get to avoid some of them, and it seems to me to be worth some consideration. So that's a revocable trust. Now, we do these estate planning workshops, which you're welcome to attend. They're free. You can find out about it at sechlerlawfirm.com. Go to the workshops tab. But the other night I was talking about trust, and I said, but the downfall of a revocable trust is that a revocable trust doesn't do anything to protect assets from the nursing home, which to me, I think is middle-class America's biggest financial threat, at least in the retirement years, is if I go to a nursing home, how's my wife, going to get by? Because I understand there's these rules that you got to go broke, and I had a fellow who was adamant that his attorney, the previous attorney, had told him that when he did his revocable trust, that it protected assets from long-term care expenses. And he even had a copy of it. And I kind of glanced at it quick and went through the table of contents and looked at it. And no, this really doesn't, because what it says is you're allowed to access the money for the rest of your life and without any limitations at all. And if you can get your money, then so can the nursing home. And we've done a lot of topics on this. I have to pick on the nursing homes, but I actually love the nursing homes. The nursing homes isn't the problem. The problem is we've got this crazy government rule book that requires you to go broke if you end up in a nursing home. And so, but when we're complaining about this financial problem, it's easier to say we don't want to go broke in a nursing home than to blame the government system every single time. But the problem is really the government system. Anyway, I digress. So the gentleman had this revocable trust, and no, you don't know this is my guy told me I was starting a 5-year clock with this trust, and I had to explain to him, I'm sorry if he said that, which I've got doubts that his previous attorney said that, or sometimes people have some selective hearing, but it sounded to me like this guy was very disappointed to learn in our workshop that his revocable trust, it wasn't doing anything to protect from this issue. And so then we started talking about irrevocable trust. Now, when you get into the subject of irrevocable trust, here's the thing. There are many, many types. Okay, so there's this consensus. Sometimes when I mention irrevocable trust, like if I'm doing one of our public events, people like shake their heads, and you can just tell, like, I ain't even gonna consider what this guy's about to say. I might as well check my email. Because people think that irrevocable trusts are permanent. They hear the word irrevocable, they think they heard the word permanent. And there are trusts where you truly do have to give up total control. You give up total access. Someone else is the trustee, a bank or the kids or whatever. And so why would we do that? Well, generally speaking, when people give up control of their assets, they're trying to accomplish a tax objective. All right. See, the IRS looks at you, and if you create a trust, they look at your trust, and they've got this set of rules that says if you create a trust and you maintain control of the trust, meaning you could be the trustee, or you change beneficiaries, or direct investments, or access to income, or half a dozen other things that you could, like the trust document could say it's an irrevocable trust, but then you retain certain powers, right? You can't revoke it because it's irrevocable, but you can maintain some control. And if you create a trust, even if it's irrevocable and you maintain control, then the IRS continues to tax you on the money. And so if I were a billionaire, right, if I were worth $1 billion, billionaires don't need to own all that money in their own name. They're never going to want for groceries, right? So if you got $1 billion, you're never going to spend $1 billion. And so what they want to do, and if you pass away with all that money, somebody's going to pay hundreds of millions of dollars of federal estate tax. So they're looking for creative ways to get the money out of their Social Security number, but they don't want to give up control, right? So I create a trust, my kids get a trust, my neighbor gets a trust, the church gets a trust, my nephew gets a trust, my nephew's dog gets a trust, like everybody gets a trust. But the wealthy person would want to maintain control over these trusts, because though they never need the money for, say, groceries, they do want control over the money when it's time for them to start their new business, that they can access the funds and all the rest, right? And so decades ago, the IRS came out with these rules that says, hey, and Mr. Rich Guy, if you create an irrevocable trust and maintain all the control, we're going to tax you on the money anyhow. Okay, so there are trusts that if you were trying to accomplish a tax objective, for example, the federal estate tax, then you would give up total control, total access, and you may be able to accomplish that objective. How so and what they would do, that's a topic for another day. But for today, I just want you to know there are irrevocable trusts where you would totally give up control and access and accomplish a tax objective. But most of us don't have federal estate tax concerns. The federal death tax, as I'm recording this, you can die with almost $13 million before there's a federal estate tax. And that's each. So for a married couple, it's almost $26 million. And so, most of us never going to worry about that. And even it's going to come back down in a few years, depending on who's in office. But, call me cynical. I don't think these guys are going to vote themselves into a death tax. And so since George W. Bush was in office, we'd have at least a $5 million lifetime exemption from the death tax. And so for a married couple, $10 million. And by definition, most of us aren't going to have to worry about that. So if we don't have tax as a concern, what is a concern? Well, the nursing home is a concern. The Alzheimer's Association says 1 in 3 people are going to have dementia. They also say 2 out of 3 of us, if we reach a certain age, are going to have some need for long-term care. And the state of Pennsylvania tells you that the nursing homes cost $13,000 a month. And you will spend $13,000 a month until you go broke, at which point in time you can access Medicaid benefits. Okay. And then Medicaid pays the nursing home. But who wants to go broke? I don't want to go broke. 3 of my 4 grandparents needed the nursing home. I don't like my odds. I can't prevent if I'm going to have dementia, but I can understand the financial ramifications of having dementia. And so there's this type of irrevocable trust called an asset protection trust. And it's really the topic of when we hold our 3 Secrets to Protect Your Legacy workshop, we spent a lot of time on this particular tool because I think it's one you ought to consider. In my opinion, many middle-class families should have one of these trusts, and not enough attorneys are talking about. Because what the trust allows you to do is maintain some elements of control. You can change beneficiaries, you could direct investments, you can hire and fire trustees. Like, you can maintain some control over the trust because we're not trying to do the old tax law. We don't have tax problems. We got nursing home problems. And what happens is you need the nursing home. God bless the angels working in the nursing home, especially after COVID. They're taking care of people. They're cleaning them up. They're doing, and a lot of people have behavioral issues. I mean, but here's the thing. A lot of people are spending $13,000 or more a month in a nursing home because the government is failing our seniors, and you have to go broke before they help you with this care cost. And so what we can do, though, is we can put some assets into a trust, an asset protection trust, and if it's properly drafted, those assets are protected from your long-term care expense, right? So let's consider the house for a minute. Most people that own a house and have some money, they're not going to access that home equity in a meaningful way. I'm not in the reverse mortgage space, but I don't see a lot of my clients doing reverse mortgages. The only time I've ever seen a client do a reverse mortgage is if they're like totally out of money. I've got home equity, I got nothing else, I need groceries. Okay, so I've seen people do reverse mortgages in that instance, but most of my clients, it turns out, really never do it, right? Why am I talking about that? Because what that tells me is you're never going to access your home equity, right? You're never going to pull the equity out of your house. You're never going to, essentially borrow money against the house to buy groceries because you've got other money to buy groceries. So if we're never going to access the home equity, then what's the harm in putting my house into a trust that allows me to sleep there every night, but says I cannot access my equity? I can't take a distribution from the trust. I was never going to take a distribution from the trust anyway. But now, since we've given up access to the equity, we've protected the value of the house from the nursing home. And my life doesn't change at all. I'm sleeping in the same house every night. The kitchen smells the same. The grass still needs mowed. But by virtue of me putting it into a trust, now I've protected a $300,000 asset from the biggest financial risk I have in life. And to me, this just makes sense. And so, there's this nonsense that I hear out there that says that middle-class families don't need trusts. Well, middle-class families don't need trusts to protect from federal estate tax. That's true. We don't have a federal estate tax concern. But if my clients tell me that they're concerned about losing all their stuff to the nursing home, then if that's their concern, which probably should be, if you haven't thought about it, then yeah, we could use a trust to protect against that issue. Everybody thinks estate planning is about answering the question, who gets my stuff when I pass away? I happen to think that a more interesting question is, how do we make sure there is still some stuff left to pass on, take care of your spouse, leave a legacy to your kids? That to me is an interesting question. And that's the type of thing that we help you understand here at the Sechler Law Firm. We are not a quick one and done law firm. We have a membership-based approach. We teach a lot of educational classes. Our clients are very, very well informed on these issues and how their tools work. And I invite you to find out more. You can go to sechlerlawfirm.com, SECHLER lawfirm.com, or go to estateplantim.com. And register for one of our upcoming 3 Secrets to Protect Your Legacy workshops. And you're going to find out that the way we do this, rather than a whole bunch of high-priced one-on-one client meetings, we do an educational series of classes that teaches you the things you need to know about the nursing home, about taxes, about trusts, about wills, to adequately protect your family. We've got this whole educational series that you ought to check out. It's a series of classes, and by the end of the series of classes, man, you get this stuff. and you can make a well-informed decision for your family on how you want to protect your money, your family, your kids, your spouse, and your legacy. And so I look forward to having the opportunity to work with your family. If you want to attend one of our upcoming workshops, 3 Secrets to Protect Your Legacy, go to sechlerlawfirm.com and register. We have them upcoming in Cranberry, South Point, and Monroeville. And I promise you, you're going to learn a lot. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And remember, this was not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you should contact an attorney. We're here anytime at sechlerlawfirm.com. Thanks for listening.